Just one more quick trick that we might be able to use to help us stay away from those dreaded fractions that we all hate so much. Now, it's inevitable that we're going to have to use fractions or end up with a fractional answer, and that's okay, but whenever possible, we're going to try to stay away from those fractions. So here's a perfect example of how we're going to use our new trick to kind of stay away from fractions. Notice that if I were to take this first row, we want a 1 in the first column somewhere. If I were to take this first row and to divide by 2, because I would make a 1 in row 1, column 1, I'd end up with a fraction here. That would become a 1/2. Not that big of a deal to work with, but let's try to stay away from fractions. Same thing if I were to divide by 3 in the second row to make this 3 a 1, I would end up with a 1/3 and a -1/5. It's just not ideal. So in order to stay away from those fractions, which I know that you guys dislike working with, here's a little trick you can use. Notice in the first column we have a 2 and a 3. Our elementary row operations tells us that we can add or subtract rows together. Notice if I take the second row and subtract the first row from it, so 3 minus 2 for the first column, we end up with a 1. That's exactly what we're looking for. No fractions, just addition and subtraction. So let's do that. We'll keep our first row the way it is, 2, 1, and 4, and we'll subtract the first row from the second row. So what I end up with is 3 minus 2 is 1. Perfect, that's what we want. 1 minus 1 is 0. And then we have our -5 minus 4, and we get -9. Notice we now have a 1 in the first column. Well, that's great. All we know what we need to do now is move it up to the first row. So we know that we can just switch the order of these rows, and once we do that, we have 1, 0, -9, 2, 1, 4. Now we're in good shape because we have our 1 in the first row, first column, and we want to just get rid of this 2, which is pretty easy to do because all I have to do now, just like before, is multiply the first row by -2, add it to the second row, and we have our 0 underneath. So let's do that. We'll keep our, we'll keep our first row the way it is. 1, 0, -9, and then we'll do a little bit of math in our head, and we'll multiply that first row by -2 and add it to the second row. So 1 times -2 is -2, plus 2 is 0. 0 times -2 is 0, plus 1 is 1. And then we have -9 times -2 is 18, plus 4 is 22. Well, it just happened to work out that if you look now in the second row, we have our 0 where we want it to be. We have a 1 next, which is great. We're going to want that. And what's even nicer is we have a 0 above the 1. So this is in reduced row echelon form. We can't go any further. We have our 2 pivots. Each row start with a 1, or the first non-zero entry is a 1. We have zeros above and below them, and there's nowhere else we can go. So this is now in reduced row echelon form. And we stayed away from fractions as much as we could. Here's the next problem I'd like you to try on your own. So if you could pause this recording, take a couple minutes, see if you could use the trick that we just used to get this in reduced row echelon form. Now again, you may end up working with fractions. Hopefully you could stay away from them as much as possible. Here's a solution to the last problem you just tried. Hopefully you did okay with it. Make sure you fill in the form below, and tomorrow come in with any questions and show in your notebooks all of the work that you've done out. Good luck. Thanks.